me think of Chelsea.
So I'm not a scientist. So I have a question for you as somebody in STEM. You are required to represent all STEM fields, right?
Yes.
Is the reason my husband's so loud because he's 7 foot tall? Like, is it not his fault? Is it? I mean, he's not actually 7 foot tall, but like, that's, a bit of an exaggeration. Is it like the lungs of super tall people are just really loud and he can't help it? Or is this years of patriarchy in
I
effect?
think
Let me know.
I would argue it's a couple of things. It might be the slightly larger lung capacity. From my experience, also, I'm rather quiet because I hear everything and I think I'm being loud enough. But the rest of my family has terrible hearing, so they think I'm really quiet and they're extremely loud. So maybe it's because he has been exposed to or is farther away from the source of the sound. So he has become used to having to be super loud, so that way it reaches
He used
its
to like
target.
yell to be heard by short people. The reason why I asked, this was right prior to going live.
Yes.
I was on Messenger with Kate and I was like, hold on one second. Like I sent her like the link to join all this. And I was like, hold on 1 second. I got to go shut the basement door because my husband's playing D&D and it's just like yelling at the top of his lungs. So I'm just trying to figure out, source of problem there, the explanation, if you will. Stormy in the chat says, hi ladies. Hi Stormy, we are so excited to be live here to chat about Marvel's What If, Only Murders in the Building, Stargirl, Supergirl, literally so much. I'm actually, Kate, you'll be so proud of me. I'm behind on reality TV right now. I haven't watched this week's Bachelor in Paradise. I know. Can I get a round of applause? Do I get a gold star?
Gold star.
Thank you so much. The other person here who gets a gold star is Carrie in the chat. He says, look at me being here on time. Do I get a reward? You do get a reward, Carrie. You also get a reward for together with me and with Steph's critical help. We figured out Only Murders in the Building is also on Disney Plus. Kate, I didn't know that there were any shows even cross-listed on Disney Plus and Hulu. Did you know that?
I saw this conversation, did not participate, but became extremely curious. I searched for Only Murders in the Building on Disney Plus and could not find it.
Oh, really? See, I currently don't have access to Disney Plus. Don't ask me how I've been watching Marvel's What If. I don't want to go to jail. But in the context of that conversation, I searched just like the Google term, Only Murders in the Building, Disney Plus, and there was like a page that came up. But then when I clicked on it, it was telling me to sign in with my subscription, which I don't have. So I just kind of let sleeping dogs lie, if you will. Carrie, if you did pull up Only Murders in the Building on the Disney Plus subscription that you do have, please confirm if that's actually the case, because Steph said she's watching it on Disney Plus, and I have to assume that that's true. However, she is Canadian, so I don't know what's going on up there in Narnia.
Yeah, for all curious parties. Now we just really want to know.
Yeah, I do. But I'm totally a fan of Only Murders in the Building taking over the multiple streaming spaces and being a pioneer, if you will. We can get into it. And in fact, I would be totally okay with kicking off tonight's discussion with Only Murders in the Building. But I will say I was a little impressed when I saw the scene in this week's episode of Only Murders in the Building where they got, was it Jimmy Kimmel, I want to say, to do like a little bit there with Tina Fey. And I was like, okay, Selena Gomez, go off. This show has some star power. So what did you think of this week's episode of Only Murders in the Building? We'll start there.
Again, I loved it. You know, it's a really fun, well-written show. It didn't particularly change or add to any of my theories a whole lot, which is kind of, a bummer because I'm me and crazy. But it it was a fun show, and it was an episode that I really think highlighted again Selena Gomez's really great skill in this show. I think because she's working with two actors that have for a long time been kind of like well known, and her not having done much acting since her Disney days. I bet that was probably like it was kind of an interesting choice, and I bet that was probably like a bit of an intimidation. And she's doing excellent. I think she's actually probably the standout performance in the show.
She is really holding her own. It's pretty incredible. When I'm watching these, like, the two older actors that she's playing alongside, one thing, and we're going to see this theme echoed in another show that we're going to talk about tonight, but one thing that I see they consistently avoid is they do not maybe dull these other guys shine. I hesitate to say it that way, but they don't kind of undersell them in order to make her look good. So if you think, for example, a good example in general of when this happens, if you think of like a Disney show or some sort of like kids show or something like that, where they may like I think like Drake and Josh got Oprah or something for 2 seconds, something like that, where they get like a guest star, or, they're punching way above their weight to show up for like 2 seconds, right? Who's like way overqualified to be there, right? And when they show up, they give them just like a couple silly, cheesy lines, so your main cast is still shining. I kind of wondered if they were going to do that here, where Selena Gomez is the star and there's sort of these big names floating around, but they're just there to deliver a couple cheesy lines, and she shines because she's really the only one there to do acting. That's not the case at all. Everybody on there is really delivering a really strong performance, and hers is also really strong. And it really helps that the story is genuinely very interesting. I found myself thinking at multiple points throughout this episode of your ongoing theories from last week. So I'd love to touch on that. But just in general, in terms of plot and character and mystery, this is setting up to be a strong franchise. And I think we talked about last week that this has definitely been renewed for season 2. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know. I think we either said that we are going to check or that we did confirm it, but I can now confirm there will be 2 seasons. There's at least renewed for a second season.
Very excited about that. Okay, let's get into theories, because the thing that sort of set off an antenna in my head for a theory that I gave last week that I fully acknowledge, I'm so sure it's wrong, it's really far-fetched, I just can't get it out of my head, was the fake death theory. And the reason why that antenna started to ping is the whole thing of the jewel on her hand but wasn't on the dead body type of thing. So I'm just circling back to your original theories. Are you doubling down on any? Are you anchoring on any? Or have you switched? Do you have anything new?
I am not, this is like, I would still make a fair argument that it could be Oscar's dad. But I think even more now, I am on the opinion that like there's more going on. Like it is a bigger, more involved thing here than the show is like announcing. And really, so far, we've been more focused on like who it's not and the people in the group. I messaged Cammie a few days ago, and I was like, I think I'm gonna pull it up because I don't like I got like into a bit of a obsessive panic. Oh crap, I can't find it. But here it is. So I said, I don't actually know if Tim is dead, but then this week it really does feel like Tim is dead.
Yeah.
Because of the detective. But I still think that it could be something to do with like his big interest in the jewels and stuff had to do with like him working with the FBI or something like that in the black market. And it could even be to the point that he figured out that Oscar's father maybe stole the ring.
Kate froze there for a second for
they
me.
got into a bit of a, she fell off. Okay, yeah, so what I was saying was maybe Oscar's dad accidentally pushed whatever her name is, I forgot, off the roof in a altercation to steal the ring off of her finger and to sell it. And Tim saw this and have enough proof fingers that or Oscar's father, then Oscar, like he would run and they would never be able to catch him, but there was no proof to sell this statement. So this whole time, Oscar's been trying to, or Tim's been trying to find ways to prove that it wasn't Oscar, but Oscar's dad by scouring the black market for this jewelry and basically trying to figure out a way to tie it all back to Oscar's father. That is my big overlying theory. It could be interchanged for some other person did it, but that's, I think, why Tim is finding the jewelry.
That makes sense to me. I guess I really started to wonder when they introduced her mom whether this is supposed to be cueing us to the fact that there's like generational stuff going on here, which is definitely tied to what you're saying. What I guess kind of stayed in my mind this week when they're kind of dealing with this idea of trust and whether two men whose name I will never remember and Mabel trust each other is whether we're supposed to be toying with the idea of like a bad trust meter and whether her reluctance to trust these guys, the two men on her team, blah, 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 is supposed to be contrasted with her inherent trust of Oscar. So what did you think of this theme of trust, which has actually been playing out for the last 2 weeks, I guess I'd say?
I do think it's interesting because I will agree with you when there is like this immediate amount of like trust and there's almost like tonal character shift when she like is with Oscar, that she kind of becomes more of like a teenage version of herself. You see like very much more like the bubbly side of her, like the nervousness of it all. When she's with Oscar, that she has more of a cool, collected, reserved personality with Charles and Oliver. But so I think it's interesting. I don't know if they were necessarily trying to like tell us, okay, we've said Oscar isn't responsible, but he is. I don't think that's a lie. I think he is scot-free on that, at least in like killing Tim.
So you like think he's a good guy, trademark, restricted, copyright?
Still make a conversation about was he responsible or not for the murder of the other girl, but I think he is in respect to everybody else, pretty good. I don't think I at least don't think he killed Tim. But I think it's interesting to point out that she is very different around Oscar, and I think for as much as she's the one that normally finds out the actual clues and like puts things together, and the other two are just kind of there in a lot of the actual detective work, I think it's going to be something that ends up blinding her to something very obvious in their investigation. I think it's going to be something like that was so clear and obvious, and it took her having to stop being so like naive about that. Like she has to take off she basically has to take off the rose-tinted glasses to figure out the problem, which I could still argue points to Oscar's father, because if she's going to defend Oscar so much, well, of course his dad isn't like that either, and maybe he is.
See, I guess that explains the like hesitance that I've had. So as soon as I saw them kissing this episode, like something in me was like, it's too soon. He has to be bad. It's too soon. This has to be wrong. Now, I don't believe in the moonlighting curse. However, I am old, so I was raised around the moonlighting curse, if you will. And I recognize this pattern, which they could absolutely be subverting. Okay, like grandma could be talking nonsense here. But I recognize this pattern where if you have somebody like hooking up or making out, whatever, at this point in the series, season 1, it's almost always that there's going to be some reveal that they were like actually the bad guy, or they'll double cross, or this, that, or whatever. And that's what I guess I'm waiting for. But number 1, I could be wrong. That could be a super old pattern and I need to get with the times. Number 2, it could be the explanation is not that he was bad, but that his dad was bad. So that still fits. So I will calm down. I will hold my horses, if you will.
I get where you're coming from, because not this episode. Like this episode, I was more okay with him, but the first episode that he was really there, it took me a long time to get over like this red alert feeling with him being there. And it's because like the past 2 episodes really have been focusing on everybody's lies. So like the last one was you figuring out just how many lies have been told, and then this one's kind of dealing with the repercussions of all the lies. But with him basically having to admit, I lied to you when I first got back out. Like I got out, and you're like, oh, why? Like, what did you lie about? And you find out really he was lying, but it was more of like he just didn't want to have to talk about death, and like the guy that could have saved him from going to prison, which I get. Like I that's a reasonable thing, but it once that happened, I was like, okay, I see why you were lying. But before that, I was like, you're lying about something. What are you not saying? So after that, I'm pretty cool with the guy. I don't think he's I don't think he's guilty of anything, or at least not of this crime. There is still a fair argument to say that he did actually kill the other girl. We don't, or was at least responsible if it wasn't Oscar's dad. But
that was another thing that kind of frustrated me about him. And I know I'm like being very judgmental and intolerant of men, but at least I'm consistent. When he did his whole thing where he was like, you know, can we at least talk about something other than death for 2 minutes? And he was like really frustrated. And to some degree, I empathize. I get it. Like you can't talk about sad stuff all the time. You're going to go crazy. But I didn't like the way he communicated that. I really didn't. He made it seem like it was Mabel's fault. Like she was the one who keeps bringing this up, and he's blaming the fact that this is all they talk about on her. Number 1, he wasn't he can leave at any time. Number 2, it's not her fault that bad things happen. Maybe it is. Like maybe she's the murderer, whatever. But in general, the fact that he's been surrounded by murder, tragedy, whatever, so has she. And she may have a particular approach, which is get obsessed about a mystery and try to solve it, which is great. That's good. Some of us can relate to that. And he may have a different approach, which is somewhat avoidance. There's a delay, so you're laughing, so I can't tell which joke in particular you're laughing at. I'll just assume I'm consistently hilarious. Anyways, he has a particular other approach, which is sometimes avoid it, sometimes want to like make out after tragedy, whatever. And I guess some people can relate to that too. I personally relate to Mabel more in the whole like, if there's a problem, we'll fix it, and then like we'll make out afterwards. Like calm down for now, right? Okay. And as such, I didn't like the premise of him acting frustrated towards her. I would like him to communicate those same emotions nicely, but now that I say it that way, that may not make for good television. Also, Carrie in the chat says he does not see it on regular Disney Plus, but it may be in the Disney Plus Hulu bundle, which makes sense, except for the fact that the Disney Plus Hulu bundle, like it's on Hulu. It's just on Hulu then. Right? Or am I crazy?
Yeah. I think so. Okay. I think you're right. I will say about your take on Oscar. I agree. I relate more to Mabel. But I think part of it also is not the line or like the decision they're making with that character, and more of the actor's not as good. And I
That
hate to
too.
be that person to
No,
like
you're right.
point out, but yeah, he, especially in this lineup of actors, he is not reaching the same level. And so she was doing really well at selling this tone, and he kind of came in with a little bit more of like a stiff and clunky person that like just attitude of it all. And I was like, that's weird.
Yeah. No, I'd agree. That is where, like some of the side characters is where it's where we're starting to see some of the acting disparity. For example, I thought Sting back in I guess it would be 2 episodes ago now, was not a great actor. No offense. I'm so sorry.
No, but I mean, he's been in things before, and it's always like, it's just funny to put Sting in things.
Yeah.
I
Again,
mean,
the show has
even
kind
just
of
like,
flexed a bit of star power or mild star power in terms of, having what was it? They've had Tina Fey, Jimmy Kimmel, just like a few people that are like wouldn't probably just normally appear in a random Hulu show, but under Selena Gomez's name, I suppose they will.
well, I mean, well, that and also like, I think Steve Martin was the one who wrote the show, so he's been in it from like the beginning.
Okay, I'll
So,
give him
and
and the
he,
other major multi generational stars some credit, I suppose. Martin Short and Steve Martin, I suppose, are like major names as well, as big as or perhaps bigger than Selena Gomez. But like, I don't want to give men credit. So Selena Gomez flexed her star power and got Jimmy Kimmel, okay?
okay, okay, yeah, totally.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
It was Selena and Selena alone
That's
that
right.
DM'd Sting and was like, listen, Sting, singer of U2, which honestly, as a music nerd, was my favorite joke of this whole show so far. Um, she, yeah, that's how that went. That's how that happened. I'm sure that's how that happened.
For sure. I'm looking at the IMDb list now because like I'm never going to remember men's names, so I have to have that in front of me in order to give anybody pseudo credit. And I'm realizing you've got like Sting in 2 episodes, you've got Nathan Lane in 2 episodes. Like that's also a pretty big pull. There's some flexes here.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess he's about to be in a comedy with Tina Fey again and John Hamm.
Mm.
Speaking of John Hamm, minor transition point here. I previously mentioned that I recommend watching The Hustler, which is like a trivia social deception show. I've been watching season 2 of it and it's been really, really good, like as good, if not better, than season 1. But because season 1 was like pretty good in terms of like, I don't know if it was good in terms of ratings. I think it was like okay in terms of ratings. But because the format of the show is very obviously like kind of it gives you the people who are on it have to act. They have to. It is a social deception game. You have to kind of fool other people, and the premise of the show is very interesting. In my opinion, it seems to have drawn like I'm not going to say celebrities because they can't put a celebrity on the show because they would be obviously a celebrity and you would know that they are who they are. But it's drawn like Olympic gold medalists, people who have worked with like a big name, like producers of this, or just people who are like borderline celebrity and celebrity adjacent on what is otherwise a trivia show. It's been really interesting and really good. Highly recommend once again. Okay, with that, we've been talking about only murders in the building, and we could circle back to some further theories if time permits. But I did want to take a chance, take a pause, take a swing back to our our headliner show, if you will, our thumbnail show. You can see perhaps from the screen cap what caught my attention, which was the presence of Darcy in this episode. And I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about not just this week's What If, but the last 2 weeks' What If, because I just caught up to both of those today, this evening, this afternoon. We've been talking a lot. Okay, I'm going to start with a gripe, but I promise I don't just have gripes. I'm thrilled, if nothing else, that we have Darcy showing up on my screen via animation, even if she is marrying a duck. Okay. We've been talking a lot about, I mean, am I wrong? We've been talking
No,
about
you're not wrong.
all of these episodes tying together and there being like an underlying story. And I really feel like we're getting down to the wire. And it might just be me, my pea brain, my 2 brain cells, whatever. But am I missing something, or are they not really tying that closely together yet? Are we going to be down to the final episode when we actually have it like spelled out for us? Or is everybody with more intelligence than me getting it?
So, a detail that I heard about while we were at DragonCon that I forgot to share with the class
Okay.
was when they got renewed for second season. So initially it was supposed to be a 10-episode season,
Okay.
but when they got renewed, they actually decided to move that 10th episode to be in the second season, and they're gonna both be like 9 and 9 or 9 and 11. I don't know, but I think what's going to end up happening is they're going to, in the next 2 episodes, probably not to really start doing everything all the time together. Because if you saw the last bit of this episode 7, you see a creepy robot figure come in, and it's supposed to be like Vision if Vision had gone evil, if Vision turned to Ultron.
Yes. With stones
what that
and
would
blah,
be
blah,
like.
blah. Yeah.
And that's, yes. And that is supposed to be an episode. So my assumption is basically this is the first one that we're truly going to get a connection between the next one. And it's going to use those next 2 episodes to really start to tie a lot of the other ones together. I could be wrong. Again, there's more Watcher in this. Like, he had the weird, like, happily ever after. Oh, wait, robots, which was weird, but
Right.
it's kind of like, I'm enjoying this show, but other than like the shows that the actual shows that I really get invested in, I'm not going to say I have really great theories about the wide, expansive reaches of the MCU. I did not love a lot of the big movies anyway. And even to be honest, like out of this most recent episode, I actually really liked Captain Marvel in this episode, but I didn't like the movie. So
that's fair.
It's one of those things. I really had no investment in her story, and I have no memory of like what happened to give any context to theories for that. I just thought she was funny as a weird like them just like hitting the crap out of each other. And
it was just fun to see Darcy like fangirl over her as well. Like when we get to see the women interact with each other, even when I may not care about like the Thor movies as movies of themselves and that trilogy, I can care about Jane in this. Even if I may not care about Loki, I care about Frigga, even if I don't care about the Marvel movies. Although I did kind of like the Marvel movies. I just think they were like almost aimed at an older demographic than me, and I'm ancient. So I can totally imagine that they're not really speaking to you. Darcy, I think we can all come together on, but again, that's younger demographic. But even though I don't care about the individual movies, when I see like the women interact, that's kind of cool, but it doesn't prompt me to generate theories about the broader universe. I'm just kind of interested in the micro dialogue and not the macro story, particularly when the macro story doesn't seem to be tying these episodes very clearly together, other than like, ooh, at the end of every episode, there's some hand wavy, ominous vibes. Like, yes, this episode, that hand wave, like we actually got a whole other scene. It wasn't just like 2 seconds, but I need a little bit more. Otherwise, I'm just here to see like fun heroines interact, which is good enough.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to restate it, Darcy is Wee's Darcy. I mean, we've known this for a while, but this just continues to reaffirm it. Like, the snarky comments and the loving of the superheroine. Of course, it's us. We basically they combined us and put it in the show, and that's Darcy. Um, but so I did enjoy that. I enjoyed just the funniness of like I don't watch a whole lot of comedies, especially like the absurdist comedies, but I could appreciate the funny joke of like you have to call the mom on the frat boy to get him like to control himself. It's funny. It's a funny joke.
Yeah.
It did kind of really like I liked Jane Foster in Thor until they really only made it to like her being the like romantic interest of Thor. But like her being a scientist and being like obsessed with the fluctuations of magnetic fields and all that stuff, that was cool. Um, and in the Thor movie, at least like her becoming a little ditzy about him, it was like somewhat balanced. It was a little bit more like Felicity Smoke, like she could still have smart dialogue while he was around. She just like went and like did the hair twirl after she said something smart. Whereas with this episode, it's very much just like he was there and she was a dit. So I'm like, didn't love that.
I find it reductive in the way that, like, I know I'm broadly stereotyping here, but in the way that a lot of animated content is reductive in terms of characters. And obviously, let's set aside children's media because children's media can often have one-dimensional characters, and that's how they're supposed to be. They are one-dimensional because they're there as just sort of like stand-in stereotypes for children to consume, whatever. Like they haven't hit formal operational thinking. It's fine. But when it comes to animated content for I guess I'll say adults, but just like my experience with like attempting to watch anime, whatever. And like this will piss people off, I know, because like people are fans of that. It just always or frequently comes across to me as most of the characters being super one dimensional. Is it the medium in general? Am I consuming the wrong things?
I think part of it is we both prefer like more nuanced character development. It's probably why we both prefer television to movies.
Sure. Yeah.
But even like, especially with this show, even more than other cartoons, which I would or animated shows, which I would agree with you that it is somewhat reductive and they're not normally as character dynamic and complex as like live action shows. With this show, because it basically has to fit an alternate movie, like the same amount of story that's in a movie, but smush it down into about 30 minutes, you basically have to kind of throw out a lot of like any secondary characters, any of their specific development, and you're really just focusing on the characterization of the main character, and even to a point that like you don't really get a whole lot of true character exploration. It just really speeds through the consequences of a change, and you're just left to assume the difference is the character because you know the original character so well. So like the other episode with Tony and Killmonger, the only reason that it felt like we knew Tony in that last episode is because we've known Tony for so long.
Yeah.
And people are going to hate me for saying this, but the version of him that we get in the show is not all that different from the version of him that we get in the movies. Yes, right. He's more heroic in the movies, but he basically in the show is pretty consistent with how he was in the movies, even throughout like movie one. Yeah, he decides to make changes, but he has that very like arrogant attitude throughout all the way through the show, and you can see how his attitude clouded his judgment to trust Killmonger. And so it's perfectly believable because there's not so much about like for Jane, and they really just use her more as a device to bring Frega to Earth. They didn't really take any care to consider, okay, well, this is how it would change her reception and interaction with Thor. Because part of me would argue that, like, she kind of found him fumbling around Earth and, like, making a mess of things somewhat endearing when it was just, like, big man throws cup on the ground.
Right.
But when it's, like, big man destroys, like, monuments and things like that because he wants to party, that's not for fun. That's not really the same thing. And I don't know if I would actually think that Jane would find that attractive or endearing. And I mean, like I said, we don't know that character super well. Like, we don't know a whole lot about her.
Maybe
So
the college version of her would.
to, but it's not something I would believe, and they don't give enough time. They don't have enough time to make it. Yeah, like I understand like why they have to limit the amount of development they can give side characters. I do. It is just frustrating because we're so used to the movies, and especially we both liked the TV shows that we're normally getting because of the character development, because they have the time to really give such depth that they just can't give here.
Yeah. I mean, that is why TV shows, I think, are their strength objectively, even beyond our personal preference. I think we were reaching the point in the MCU where people were starting to care about the characters and were starting to get consistently frustrated with every movie with the lack of character-driven content, because there was also not really deep plot-driven content, if we're being honest. It wasn't like some this is a really bad example, but think of like some classic M. Night Shyamalan movie, but like one of the good ones where you may not necessarily learn too much about the characters, but the plot is very like suspense and plot twisty and, you know, situation based type of thing. It wasn't like every Avengers movie was that. It was always Avengers versus some big hero. So it was a setup for what would have been a good environment to have character driven content. And they had a lot of inconsistencies with characters, which you can avoid if you have a TV show and it is well done. You can also avoid that if you have a movie series and it's well done and character driven, but they chose not to do that. Carrie makes a good point in the chat. He says, I was just happy to see a happy Thor. He's lost everything. If anyone deserves fun, it's him. And he and Jane had more chemistry in 30 minutes than all the MCU. I think that's a really good point. And it is nice sometimes to see our heroes happy. I think that's one of the aspects of the show that presents such an interesting opportunity, kind of keeps me watching, because every week, pretty much, I'm messaging Kate being like, okay, that was cool, but like, when are they going to give me a rom-com for like some same-sex couple in their universe that they wouldn't let like be happy or be together? Literally any of them. Because that's what I want. I love a good college party movie. That's so great. Love it. Good for you. But can we get a good rom-com episode for characters who otherwise would have never had a rom-com movie?
Here's what I want. I want a 30-minute episode. Like, if it has to be 30 minutes and this is the only way I can get it, I would love it if we could just get 30-minute episodes of each couple. But if this is how we have to do it, I want like a 30-minute like Love Actually style where it's just a whole bunch of romances and we're just getting like the cut scenes, like the milestone cut scenes of their romance and lives together. I just want that. Can I just have like give me happy Wanda and Vision living their American like small house dreams, and give me, you know, like all the other popular ships that they seem to hold back on for some ridiculous reason, and give me those. I want that.
Wanda and Vision can be the token heterosexual ship, since Kate insists.
I do it. Really, it has less to do with Vision, like Wanda and Vision. I like Vision, don't get me wrong, but it's more of Wanda has had some real sad stuff. I mean, her happy just like once, fine.
I would love to see Wanda be happy just for once. I would also love for people to stop referring to Wanda as a villain, but
Are you
no.
trying to give me a heart attack or like
Bef-
raise my blood pressure or something?
Before Kate's blood pressure spikes again, I see that we only have 15 minutes left. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna chunk this into 5 5 5. So 5 minutes, I will go through everything else I watched this week that we have not yet covered in tonight's episode. Then you have 5 minutes to talk about everything you've watched this week or read or whatever that was not covered in tonight's episode. And then we're gonna end with something you thought I forgot, but I did not forget, which is what we usually open with, which is the news. So, 5 5 5.
Yes.
What do we think? We can get through it? I've already consumed a
We can
minute
get
of
through
that
it.
time. Okay, cool. So, here's what else I watched this week other than reality shows that I'm somewhat behind on. Everybody say good job, Cammie. Okay.
Good job, Katie.
Thank you. So I have watched Lucifer. I'm halfway through the latest season. The latest season is only 10 episodes when usually it's like 20 something, whatever. And last season, they actually like chunked it into parts, whatever. But we get a 10 episode wrap up season. And so far, it's been pretty good. I will say they're doing a thing which typically annoys me, which is introducing a somewhat main character in the very last season when there's only 10 episodes to wrap everything up. And that main character is one of the ship's long lost daughter. So I'm just like, but it's cool, it's cute, it's somewhat, shippy, whatever. I will also say it is very obvious, and I haven't been spoiled on this, and I don't mind if I am. So feel free to spoil me in the chat if you've been watching Lucifer. But they also seem to be kind of hinting at a little bit of angst between the main couple in terms of he's going to like go to heaven and be God, spoiler, or like that's the plan right now. I don't know. We'll see what happens. And she's kind of like missing her life as a detective. And I can just see the writing on the wall like, this is going to end with an unhappy ending. And I know that the way they're doing that is supposed to get you like invested and give you like a little bit of trepidation and kind of have you on the edge of your seat and like they're happy now, but something bad might happen. I don't know if it's like age or negativity or what it is with me, but that trepidation is not pleasant. Like, I would rather have them apart in the final season. Not that I want that either. I would like to see them together. But I'd rather have them apart in the final season and be working back together than have them together in the final season and be working towards like an eventual angst. But I'm willing to let them sell me on something different. This show's been consistently medium to good before, medium to hot, if you will. So I will wait and see. Carrie in the chat regarding our MCU discussion said, funny thing about the MCU, the closest they came to character narrative was the party scene in Ultron, and strangely enough, it's considered the weakest of the Avenger movies. I wonder if that scared Marvel. I think you're right, first of all. And I think Marvel consistently listens to the wrong people, but is still doing a good job. Like, you really can't fault
Yes,
them.
because it was one of my favorite movies.
Right. You really can't fault them, or I really can't fault them, although I do. While I'll complain about their formula and their priorities, it's obviously selling. It's obviously popular. So clearly what they're doing is right. While there may be bits and pieces that I'm not caring for, clearly the system they put together is enough to have me talking about it. And if they listen to my complaints, they would probably be less successful. So I'll sit in my DC corner and enjoy content from both sides, I suppose. Stargirl has been pretty good this week. And one thing I will say really positive for Stargirl is they've been toying with the guilt associated with being a superhero who kills. Specifically, there's one girl on the team who is willing to kill, although she hates it. And it's like associated with what is portrayed as essentially Catholic guilt. Like she goes to confession, and which is just like an interesting and perhaps relatable character trait. But they've been toying with this idea of like being on a team of mostly teens, right, who like aren't really supposed to be killing or trying not to kill, and she's the one who is willing to kill, and she's starting to resent them for the fact that they kind of know that when it comes down to facing the big bad, she's gonna have to kill. And I'm just like, whoa, you guys bit off some really interesting ethical stuff here, right? Like
Wow.
you can see that on Kate's face. It's really
Like,
interesting stuff. It's like the kind of ethical discussion that I kind of thought back in the crossovers when we had Arrow and Flash and Legends and everybody else, I thought they would get into this idea of
what do you
resenting the
mean? Are you saying that Arrow? Are you saying that Arrow posed a lot of ethical questions and had strong character development only to come into the other Arrowverse shows for them to squander it and ruin it for the rest of us? Saying that?
Yes. When we got into that whole like killing Nazis thing in the Arrow crossovers, and we saw some heroes willing to kill and some heroes willing to not kill, we never really got a deep discussion of like resenting the good, shiny, up on a pedestal heroes for keeping their hands clean while you're forced to do the dirty work. It was a really interesting thing to see it discussed in what is essentially like a teen web show type of thing, when other shows were like, oh, like we're gonna, do this whole thing and set up the idea for these emotions to exist, but we'll just end with them sitting at the bar and drinking a beer. Anyway, in the chat, Carrie says Stargirl was dark. I liked it also. Yolanda's parents are even worse than Beth's parents. Strongly agree. And Stormy says, you will be able to compare Lucifer and Arrow's endings. It's not what I wanted for either couple, but it's not my show. Ooh, Stormy's got me interested. By this time next week, Stormy, I will have finished Lucifer, probably, maybe. I will also be catching up on my reality TV shows. So no promises, but almost definitely I will have caught up on Lucifer, and I am excited to see how it ends. Even if it's not what I would have picked, I can only assume whatever endings I would have picked for any given show would be like less popular and equally disliked. So Supergirl, one quick note about that. I realize I've taken more than my allotted 5 minutes. They had Diggle on there this week. It was really good. I remember around the beginning of this discussion tonight, I said that Only Murders in the Building does a really good job of not dulling other characters' shine to make one character look good. This week's episode, I think Supergirl slightly failed at that, but succeeded at almost everything else. I actually just watched Supergirl before we went live, and I'm gonna be honest, even despite my cold, dead heart, I literally teared up, like actual tear came down my cheek, and I had to like go fix my dumb purple eyeshadow in the bathroom before we went live from the ending of tonight's Supergirl episode. They do a couple things in tonight's episode. Well, it wasn't tonight, this week's episode of Supergirl, but I just watched it. They do a couple things that I don't think any CWDC show has done before that I really appreciated. However, in the process of doing that, they did make Supergirl make some sort of emotionally out of touch missteps that I felt were out of character for her because she has worked through those exact things before. So that is just like one tiny little note. I really wish they had let this new Guardian shine without making it look like Supergirl was making mistakes that she has learned from before. But overall, excellent episode. Can never complain about an episode. That makes me actually tear up. Isn't that disgusting? It was really good. But they had Diggle on this week's episode, kind of talking Guardian through her transition. Diggle has become quite the hero whisperer, and he did an excellent job. So really enjoyed it. Stormy says, I adore Diggle, but honestly, given how other Arrowverse shows treat Arrow characters, I don't watch. That's super fair. They seem to be using Diggle in the past few episodes that I've seen him in, like on various shows, to spur a particular hero's journey. So he spurred the new Guardian's journey, Kelly Olsen. He spurred Luke's journey on Batwoman. And as such, he's done a great job. And I think they need to give him his own Green Lantern spinoff, but nobody asked me. Okay, Kate, I stole so much of your time. Talk us through what else you watched this week and talk us through any news that we should know about.
So I actually didn't have anything I watched this week, but my commute audio consisted of two different audiobooks that I read. So I finished The Midnight Library. I mentioned that a little bit last week.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it is about like the universe converging or whatever, but like right now, every piece of media I'm consuming feels like it has something to do with time travel or time pausing and like the consideration of alternate universes and realities and questioning your decisions and stuff and basically choosing to live in the moment. I mean, fine, do that, I guess. I enjoy the like so this is not a sci-fi book, but it is a literary fiction book about a woman who is so depressed and lays down on her luck and she it is a basically a kind of I guess image of heaven is I guess best way to describe it. Um, basically between life and death. Um, and how it's represented in her subconscious is a library because she likes books because it's a book. Um, and she, for every possible regret that she's ever had, everything that she could have ever made the different decision about, she can go back and she can open up a book and read what her life would be like from that time, like this time of her life on. So she goes through and she goes like, well, what if I had ended up marrying my fiance, or what if I went to Australia, or all these different things. What if I had become a glaciologist in Antarctica or wherever it was? All these things, and you basically get to experience it, and she has to piece together like what has changed in this timeline. Basically, it has to kind of figure it out, and she has to live in it until she realizes it's not any better than what she has, and decides that's not the life she wants. So she basically can choose a life. And it was an okay book, and I was reading it, and it was okay, but in the middle slowed down a little bit. I was like, okay, this is starting like you pick up the pace, and then the last life she lives before the thing changes, that made me cry. So you know it's a good book if it made me cry.
Mm-hmm.
It I won't like explain it because there's a lot that you have to understand. You have to read the book to understand it. But it was so beautifully done. And at first I was a little nervous about what they were going to do with it because essentially like she realizes like she has a life with a husband and a daughter, and she didn't realize that she wants that. And then when she lives this life, she does. And I was worried that because she knew that she in real life she knew the man that was she was married to in this dream or in this like alternate reality. And I was worried that the first thing that she was going to do when she woke up in the hospital was like they were going to make her go find the guy. And no, it's just more like she just starts to make decisions to live in the moment, to try to find joy in her life. And if things happen, they happen. And she needs to like she starts to try to let go of her past regrets and stop looming on them and just like enjoy life as it is. And I thought it was really great and well done.
That sounds really good.
It was really good. And then I started a new book after that called The Invisible Life of Addie Larue. And that's another popular book right now.
That sounds really familiar
I
to
have
me.
mixed feelings. Yeah. It's by V.E. Schwab. Yeah.
Okay.
I like the writing style, and it's also like a mildly sci-fi. So this one is about a girl in like 1756 or something like that, in France, makes a deal with the devil, sells her soul to the devil. She basically is like gets her freedom and like all the time in the world for her to pick life and stuff like that, in exchange for her soul. What she doesn't understand is by making this deal, she cannot leave any impression in the world. So like she can't write her name. Nobody remembers her past like a conversation. So she returns home. Her parents don't remember who she is. She can't like write her letters. Nobody ever knows her name. So every day she has to like meet new people and stuff like that. Until finally, in like 2014 in New York, she meets a boy who remembers her the next day. and it's following that and like his own deal with the devil. So he also has made a deal with the devil, and you have to figure out like what his problem is, like why he made that deal and what the repercussions of that is. Which is good, but there's something of like I can't put my finger on it. There's just something about it that it kind of bothers me, and I can't quite figure it out. It's
As
not.
if
I'm
because
not
she
done with
already
the book
had
yet, so maybe
her
when
own
it's done, I'll be able
situation
to.
and they're suddenly like splitting the situation and making it about him.
No, because it's still if there is a focus, it's still on her, and it actually like, the whole reason they really focus on him having an issue is more of like the devil made a mistake basically, like by granting him this deal, like it kind of makes a paradox. So he can remember because like his wish was like people to need him, like for him to be enough for somebody. So after he makes this deal, anybody that sees him, like he becomes a vision of like, what they want most out of him. So like his parents now see him as the perfect son, and like his ex fiance or like the girl he proposed to is like into him again and like starts to flirt with him, and like the barista gives him her phone number, and but what they think why he can remember her is the one thing she wants in the world is for somebody to remember her. So it's like a paradox, like
Mm.
nobody can remember you, but for his to work, like he has to remember her. And then his thing is like he just wants to be like enough for somebody, and like now that he has to be enough for everybody, he is enough for her because he can remember her. So it's like this whole paradox thing, like a reason. So that part doesn't bother me. I think it's just like the characterization of him is not great. There's things that he does that doesn't make a lot of sense. Um, I think there's a lot of like it is kind of in that new adult genre. Um, so there's a lot of like it's not super explicit, but there is a lot of like sexual conduct on both parties, which is fine. And I actually don't mind it for her because there's a reason. Like it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But for him, I'm like, you're having like you have sex with everybody you meet. That doesn't make any sense for your character. Whereas with
Right.
her, it's like I just like she just needs to feel something. I'm like,
Right.
okay, I get it. I'm like,
Right.
there's something that doesn't make sense to me in my brain. I'll finish reading it and I'll let you know. And then for the news. So today I saw that Netflix bought up the rights of, I never get this name right, uh, Roald Dahl. So like
Yes.
James and the Giant Peach and those
Yes.
books.
I
Netflix
saw
bought the
that.
rights to all the books. So now they're going to make TV shows and movies for all the books. And I'm so
Yes.
excited.
I'm very excited as
I,
well. I think it's going to fall
um,
into an interesting genre too for them of like somewhere between kid and young adult, you know?
yeah, like that middle school, very much like the Mysterious Benedict Society, where it's
Yes.
kids,
Yes.
but they're dealing with some
Series of
like heavier
unfortunate
topics than just a normal
events.
kid show.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And then the other news is the Emmys were this week, and Cammie and I were not disappointed at all in the results
No.
of the Emmys. Not at all.
Disappointed but not surprised, I suppose I could say.
Yes. It's one of those things that it doesn't surprise me that they didn't give the awards to a superhero show, but like also everybody that won, I never heard about those shows ever. I'm sure they
Grandma
were great.
remembers the
People,
time where superhero shows weren't even getting nominated for this. So I understand. Carrie in the chat says regarding your mentioned time travel, Kate, time travel, Legends of Tomorrow, Collision Course.
I've watched a few episodes of it. I heard there was an episode where Jane Austen was in it, and I just watched that episode specifically to watch her. And I
On brand.
honestly, I remember this being I remember this being several years ago, and I don't know what was up, but I remember watching it. And I was like, I feel like I'm high.
Yes. The show absolutely watches
Wait,
like you're supposed to watch it high, and whoever wrote it was high. I also will say that
yeah,
we are 5 minutes over time. However, I stole a bunch of your time. So please wrap up the news, continue. Don't let me cut you off.
that is actually it. I tried
Oh,
to find more, but that was all I could find.
bless you.
Excuse me.
Kate has the
Thank you.
curse of the southern allergies, as did I last week, but this week it's doing a little better. I did some naturopathic allergy treatments and it's working.
Yes. The
Okay,
south
well,
and the rain.
yeah. I will release you all back into the void. I had a really good time talking about What If and Only Murders in the Building. I am dreading the end of both of these shows because I'm really enjoying it. However, I know they will be immediately supplanted by a couple other things on the horizon, both for Marvel and mysteries and TV shows. And we're about to enter the fall TV show season, anyways. So excited about that. I will talk to you next week.